Hey CEOs, I am so excited to launch my very first Global Power Tour podcast. And this is season 1, and how fitting that season 1 starts off with my most successful client, Dr. Lauren Josephs. So, first of all, I know you and I talk about you all the time. I use you as the example of so many different things, but I want you in your own words to tell me, who is Dr. Lauren?
Hey, Christy, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. When I think about myself, I just think I'm a Jamaican girl. Bottom line, that's it. Family oriented, close knit family that I grew up in. And I'm a Jamaican girl who works hard. That would be how I describe myself.
Now, that's the modest bio. That is the modest bio, but guys, this is normal Dr. Josephs. I want you to tell us, because I think it's 6 in one, half a dozen in the other. You don't have to have degrees to be a successful entrepreneur. However, if you put in all the work to get those degrees and certifications and all those things to let everybody know that you deserve to be in the room, let's talk about it. So can you give us some of your background, your degrees, your education, your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career as a therapist. I'm actually still a licensed psychotherapist in the state of Florida. So I have master's and specialist degrees in mental health counseling. And I am a health disparities researcher and behavioral scientist. I did that through returning to school to get my doctoral degree. And my primary interest is to work on addressing inequities in outcomes. So that's the connecting thread across my work.
Okay. So you said you're a Jamaican girl, and I'm sure you guys can hear the accent slightly. Unless we get really excited, then we're going to really hear. Tell me, what made you move from Jamaica to the US, and then when did you do it, and how was that transition?
Yeah, so I've been in this country since I was 13 years old, and when we first came, it was because my grandparents who were living in New York for quite some time wanted us to be here. I remember when I was in the 4th grade that we were supposed to make that transition, but my parents really didn't want to move. You hear a lot of stories about people clamoring to come to the United States. That wasn't our background. My parents really had a hesitance in moving, across the world to the United States. But my grandmother, who has passed away now, really tugged on my parents' heartstrings, saying, I want my grandkids here before I die. She lived many decades after that. So she wasn't on death's door or anything. But that's how we moved here. My grandfather was a farm worker in New York. That's how he moved to the United States. That was my father's stepfather, not his biological father, but that's who we know as grandpa. And so that's how he moved to the United States, was through working on the farms, apple orchards specifically in New York.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So tell me this. I don't know if this is just, is this a rumor? Is it true? Is some truth to it? I heard a lot of Jamaicans, they want their children to be doctors. That's really strong in the Jamaican community. Am I right? Did I hear that correctly?
Well, a lot of them want their children to have some degree beyond a bachelor's degree, so some advanced education. So not necessarily doctors, but they want their children to have some form of standing. I remember when I was younger, I told my parents I wanted to be a DJ.
Wait a minute.
And I mean Jamaican DJ, like dance hall DJ, not like DJs like you call them here, but like Beanie Man and Spragga Benz and that type of DJ, like the artist.
That's why Kevin likes you so much. Look, wait a minute, Beanie Man, that's what you wanted to do. And yeah, so what mom said?
And I told that's what, when I approached my parents, I said, I want to be a DJ or a comedian. And neither of one of those went over.
From here on out. From here on out. A DJ or a comedian,
Yep.
and you end up becoming a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad told me, he's like, you have no ambition, you know. But
Wow.
yeah. You know, it was probably a good thing that they said that, because I have no real skills in that area. I just love the vibe of dance hall music. So they were steering me towards my talents. So yeah, it was a good thing, even though they did say that, you know, my dad was like, no.
So it shook it out of you, basically.
Yeah. Every
So
now
tell
and
me
then
this,
I
so
still
was
I
there-
still show my skills to, you know, those who love me behind closed doors. But yeah.
So we're gonna have to get this out of you. I need to see these skills.
Christy, no. Another
No.
time.
Well, tell me this, like, how did they feel when you went from, okay, I'm a therapist, I have a career, I have a professional career, a very buttoned up career, to mom, dad, grandma, I'm an entrepreneur. I want to be an entrepreneur. How did they feel about that? What was that like?
You know what? My mother was an entrepreneur. So
Okay.
it wasn't a shock. I didn't have those responses that I hear many of my colleagues who transitioned into entrepreneurship had. So there was, by the time I became an entrepreneur, my father had passed away. So it was mommy who I shared my desire to. And this woman, I know that I am who I am because of her, because she has always just leaned into whatever my interests were. She has always supported me, even though she thought some of what I wanted to do was crazy, like it was outside of her idea of what should be normal or typical for her daughter. She never stifled me. And this has always been the case, you know, and I've always been that child who would show up and make grand announcements about things. Like, you know, when I was 13 or 14, I showed up and I said, you know what, I'm not eating red meat anymore. And the next day, the meals were different for me.
Oh, your mama different. Your mama is nice. My mama wouldn't have cared. Okay? Baby, this is what we got in the freezer. That's what you're eating. So she supported everything.
Everything. She supported everything. I think a part of that is that she always felt that I was the child who was traumatized for being sent away, even though that wasn't my experience. I went to boarding school, so that's what I mean by sent away. I went to a very good boarding school in Jamaica for high school. High school starts at 7th grade. And so I passed the common entrance and went to a school that my father wanted me to go to because of its academic excellence. And so I was 10 in the 7th grade. And so she felt like,
Wait a minute.
traumatized.
That's kind of early. So you were in 10th, you were early in high school.
Yes, yeah.
So you want to be a comedian or a DJ. Now, I already knew you were smart, but you're telling us that you were extra smart. You were in the 7th grade and 10 years old.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why they didn't want these skills they didn't want you to be a DJ, Lauren.
Exactly.
Now, you've traveled all over the world. You're very well traveled. When did that happen? How did that happen? Like, okay, you got out of college. What was your first career? When did you start traveling? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when I got out of college, my first job was as a therapist for youth who were on probation. So children who had mental health concerns, but also were involved in criminal activity. And so therapists were provided to them to assist them and their families, you know, through whatever challenges they were having and that needed to be addressed therapeutically. And so that's how I started my career. My interest in travel has always been there. I'm an avid reader, so I always would read about different places and would get lost in just hours and hours in reading. And my parents supported that, but then I also learned that it got me out of chores because they supported the reading. And so, oh, leave her, she's reading a book. So, okay, so from now on, I'm always going to be reading a book. But that's how I started my career. I started out making $10 an hour, Christy, with master's and specialist degrees in mental health counseling while
Stop.
working towards my licensure.
Are you serious?
$10 an hour. $10 an hour. I was working for county government, and so I didn't have a lot of expendable resources for traveling, but I knew that it was something that I wanted to do. I have still do this burning desire to explore and learn about other cultures and so on. And so when I started traveling, it was as a solo traveler, sometimes
Really?
connected to, yeah. So
By yourself, you weren't scared at all?
No, not really. And sometimes in retrospect, I'm like, should I have been scared?
I know.
And then ultimately I had the opportunity to travel with peers who I went to school with and then a good friend of mine who also went to the same boarding school. We went on some trips together. But yeah, I've traveled to many places, to South Africa and Brazil and China and Russia and among others. I like to go far and wide, and just it reminds me of a couple of things. First of all, we are not that different, even though we think we are. And we are really small when we look at the universe and all that it involves. So it's centering for me in a sense. It reminds me to be grateful for the opportunities that I now have, whereas maybe my grandmother may not have, or my grandfather, who was a farm worker, he used to say he wanted to go to Las Vegas. I was talking with my sister about this the other day, that I wish that I were an adult and had the ability to take my grandpa to Las Vegas, because he always told my grandma he was going to run away with one of the showgirls in Las Vegas because they could kick their legs really high. But
all right, Grandpa.
but yeah.
So tell me this. You made me think about it when you said you start off at $10 an hour. Do you feel like starting off with all of the degrees and all of the certifications and everything that you have, $10 an hour, do you think that was normal? Or do you feel like that had something to do with your gender, your race, your something? Or did you feel like that was normal?
Christy, I was insulted. And so when I was insulted by the $10, I was happy to get a job. I felt like I needed to be employed, right? So I was living with mommy, and I felt I needed to be employed. So I was insulted by the $10, but that wasn't as bad as when I demonstrated my skill, and then I was pulled aside and told that, we're going to bump you up because of your great work, and we're going to bump you up to $12 an hour. And so then I was really insulted because I'm like, dang. And then I remember this person who said to me, the supervisor, and she's like, you don't look excited. That's $25,000 a year. And what stunned me was the expectation that I should have looked excited for the $12. You're going to get benefits and so on. I'm like, yeah.
And I'm guessing you needed all those degrees to even get that job.
Yes. Yeah, because it was a requirement. You had to have a master's degree. I had already passed my licensure exam. I needed the postgraduate 2-year supervision to become licensed, but I didn't think that was normal. I've always thought that I was special.
You are.
I've always had this feeling. It's like, and people take it or leave it, but I've always felt inside that I was capable of more, I deserved more, and I was just stunned by what was being offered to me. But I really enjoyed the work. Despite the amount that I was compensated, I really enjoyed the work and I gave my best. And I think that without having the opportunity to work in that space, I would not have gained clarity about what I really wanted to do. Because it was in working with those youth and going into their homes and listening to their challenges that I recognized that there was something really wrong about how people received services who were members of communities that were marginalized, how people, the differences in outcomes, the penalties they receive for committing similar offenses. And so that was a string that I started to pull that led me to get an understanding of all the structural inequities in the United States, the way that systems were designed to really oppress some segments of our communities. And so that's what led me to become a researcher and health disparities researcher specifically, because that looks from the health, behavioral health, which is mental health and substance abuse, as well as physical health, looking at all those social determinants, those structural determinants, all those factors that lead to negative outcomes for people who look like me, people who are Black, people who are immigrants, people who, live in poverty. So that is what makes me tick, because I struggle to see systems that continually recreate themselves to become more efficient at oppression.
So tell me, what is the most touching or even project that just revealed the most to you in your career so far? Like, what project just really took the blanket, you're like, wow, this is really what the world is?
I've worked on a lot of different projects, and probably I'll speak of a recent project that I worked on, which didn't really, I already knew the challenges that existed, but it spoke to the depth and breadth of the issues that exist specifically around mental health and behavioral health. So when I say behavioral health, that means mental health and substance abuse. They're two different fields, but when combined, it's called behavioral health. But what I learned in conducting the mental and behavioral health system analysis of Orange County, which is a county in Central Florida, was how different it is for various segments of the community to access care. So what some people wouldn't have to give a second thought to, others are struggling, and then the care that they do receive is substandard. And so it's just really hard, because when you look at how people with mental health concerns are, the stigma attached to that, the feeling that there is something wrong and different and something that you should be excluded for because of a brain-based disorder versus a physical health disorder, I find that to be problematic. And so when I see all the additional challenges that people face who have limited English proficiency, or people who have no insurance, or people who are cannot take the time off from work to get services, because the services are offered during traditional business hours, and you are an hourly worker who, you can't just take off.
true.
If you take off, you don't get paid for that time. So it just reinforced the importance of awareness. And what I hope is that over time, we'll start looking at mental health concerns as they're nothing more different than when we go get a blood pressure check, when we go to seek a therapist, or when we get medications for mental illnesses. We shouldn't think about it any differently than when we get a high cholesterol diagnosis and we get medication for that. But I think a big part of the problem, Christy, is that we have no clear standards around when we should reach out for help. Like when, you go to the gynecologist for a pap smear, how often you go for that. You check your breast, you do breast self-exams monthly, that at what age you go and get a colonoscopy, that all of these things that we know that they drum into us so that we know how to take care of our physical selves. There's nothing on the mental health side that's equivalent. So people wait an average of 11 years after they experience their first symptom to get help, which causes a whole host of problems. So the work that I'm most proud of is I'm proud of all my work, but in recent years, this one I feel has the opportunity for impact because recommendations were made to the county and they're in the process of implementing those recommendations and using that to address the challenges in the mental and behavioral health system of care in my community. So I was happy about that work, sad about the depth of the challenges that exist, but happy about the potential impact.
Well, let's go into your business. Let's go into how you got into, first of all, let's talk about where the name Pro Bono came from.
Oh my God, Christy. I'm a helper, right? That's my nature. And that's really the nature of my work. I really want to help to improve outcomes. But I was doing that to my own detriment because I was helping everybody and every business, every nonprofit, and not charging, right? So I would be, can you speak here? Oh, no problem. Your expertise would be helpful in helping us to go through our strategic planning process. No problem. So I was doing that. So I was really, really busy and not getting paid for it. So my family started calling me pro bono because they would ask me, are you going to get, after they realized that I was doing all this stuff and my position was no better in life, I was still struggling. Like, how are you doing all of this stuff? And, you still struggling because I'm doing it from my heart. I'm doing it pro bono. So I said, no, are you charging? No, it's pro bono. Are you charging? No, it's pro bono. So they started calling me pro bono. And yeah, that's weird. That's where they don't call me pro bono no more.
No more, huh? That's the old name. Y'all.
I still do quite a bit pro bono, but that's how that came up.
Guys, my first case study that I put together on a client was on Dr. Joseph, and it was from pro bono to seven-figure entrepreneur. So I want you to talk about the transition from pro bono to when you first started charging and getting into government contracting, and tell us how that happened. There's so many ladies, guys, I send everyone to Dr. Joseph because this is the only person that I know that is the best at helping you to understand what, figuring out what people are looking for and putting together the most professional bid proposal for any type of government contracting. So tell us how you got into that, because I get an enormous amount of questions about this specific subject.
So I was working as a health disparities researcher at a large hospital system at the time. I decided that I wanted to develop my own consulting firm. And I knew that I didn't have the luxury of leaving without a plan. I didn't have, a stack of cash to lean on. I didn't have, a trust fund. I didn't have anything of that sort. And so even though I had at that time left the mental health direct service provision with the youth on the youth on probation, and at that time I had received my doctoral degree, I was working in the field of my interest, I really felt that I wanted to do more. I wanted to work particularly on the types of studies, the types of work that really was from my heart. And so because I knew that I couldn't be homeless, and I didn't want to have to move back home because I had moved out, and then the shame. Jamaica is a very shame-based culture. Me no want to feel shame. The shame that would have come up for me to say, okay, I can't afford my apartment now, and then let me go back home and all that. I'm not built that way. So I started to explore where I could get funding to do the work that I wanted to do. And I was first exposed to organizations getting grants through the hospital system where I work. So I wanted to know, how can I do this for myself? And so it took me from the time I decided to leave, and then leaving and working full-time in my own business, it was about a 2-year process. So
okay, it wasn't immediate.
Yes, but I received my first federal contract within 7 months of starting my business. And the way that I was able to do that is because I did the work. I started thinking about what the process might be. I started thinking about the nature of the work that I wanted to do. I started doing the research to identify previously funded projects to get an understanding of who funds what I do. Gotcha. I think a lot of times, Christy, the reason why people get lost in the process is that they think that they should just be able to do one search and then it drops in their lap, the ideal funding source, but it doesn't work like that. It took a lot of time and energy to identify a project similar to the one that I wanted to fund through my business, who funded it. And I look back, I did a retrospective glance on how often they funded similar initiatives. And then I put it on my calendar for a year out, because from what I looked at, it was within a 60-day period, the same time of each year, where they would release their RFP, their request for proposal. And so I put it on my calendar to start checking in the future year. And then and it came up again. This was years ago, before they had SAM.gov. It was a whole different.
Y'all, she dropped a gem on you real fast.
And so when I identified it, I was able to move through the application process pretty quickly because I had planned. I was working from a year out to identify it when it came up. And then when I identified it and said to myself, if this comes again, I want to be able to go after it. I had already thought through what would the different elements look like if the RFP is similar to previous ones. And so, so it was the very first one that I had written.
But you just said a whole bunch of things. So you researched and found the old RFPs.
Yes. And that's something that I would recommend, that when people are looking for opportunities and they don't see something, then look at expired contracts, look at expired funding opportunities for all of these different federal agencies and local government agencies and foundations. Many of they have archived information. And so it takes time to go through it. But if you have time to waste. A lot of us waste time. We're not efficient with our use of time. You can carve away an hour or two a week if this is something that's important to you. So I look through copious amounts of expired funding opportunities to learn more about who funded, which agencies, which organizations, which foundations fund the types of things that I do. And that's been instrumental in identifying opportunities. So I found that one, I wrote that one, I got that one. And that first one was for $100,000, which then that was a contract, which then turned into a cooperative agreement, which was over $850,000 over a period of years for that one program.
Stop. Wait. You got 100,000 for the first one. Then over a certain amount of time.
And because of good performance on that first one, I got a 5-year one. And so that was from that same funder. But in the same space of time within that first year, I also found the 100,000 was for a grant. Another 240 was the 100,000 was for a contract. The other 249,000 was for a grant that I received in that first year. So in that first year of starting the business, I was able to get $349,000 in funding to do the work that I wanted to do. But I still stayed in corporate for another 2 years.
Okay. You planned long term. You did an enormous amount of research on what had been done, what had been funded, what types of companies they were looking for, what types of companies they paid. You found it, you put it on your calendar. You'd already thought through what you would offer if they put out something like that again, a bid like that again. Then you stayed at your corporate job for another 2 years, even though you had just made a lick of $350,000 in 7 months of your first year with your side business. Did I get that all correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Guys, I'm learning things as well. These are several gems just dropped where, now, Dr. Joseph, you're going to tell me all about your incubator and how you help entrepreneurs and people who are hopeful to get these types of grants and everything go through the entire process, and you handhold them and everything. You're going to talk about that and tell us about that. But first, as you have built this program where you're actually taking women and you're taking them through your proven process, what has been like, what if you had to just narrow it down to one thing? When the ladies come to you, or when people come to you and they are wanting to get into getting contracts, because you can do much better business planning when you have a chunk of money than when it's coming in bit by bit. What would you say has been like the number one reoccurring problem or obstacle that these women or men come with when they get in your program?
So far, it's been all women.
Okay.
and all Black women, which I have been really excited about, because when I wanted to do the incubator, my intent was to provide a blueprint to Black women, because I know of the statistics around the revenue that's earned and the disparities in that with Black women-owned businesses. I know the failure rate. I know all of the challenges with that. I would say that when the women, one of the common threads that I see in the women who sign up for the incubator is that I'm not sure if there is the awareness of how grand, how big, how voluminous, how their impact could be, because there is this fear and this unbelief about how they can move through this space. So they want to get contracts, but there's this real and palpable doubt about whether or not it's possible.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
and yeah,
Huh.
it's yeah, so and it's a real contradiction because they sign up. But what I've found has happened, and I've done 2 incubators so far, is that there's a fair amount of reaffirming that the dreams are valid, that there is not a need for additional skills and abilities, that you
Okay.
already have what it takes, that your credentials are sufficient, that once you learn the process, it's about taking the time to pull the weeds and dig through the dirt and apply the lessons learned to be able to get to the other side. Somehow I have seen over time that there's this expectation, and this is not necessarily true of the women in the incubator, but there's this expectation that I see of this fast return, of this limited work. And I don't know, it's like you do the bare minimum and then it all falls into place.
That's what I thought. That people wouldn't be patient. That's why I asked you, like, it took you a while. People think things happen overnight. So you think so as well?
Yeah, and so it's like you see that I got a contract in 7 months, but there was a whole 2 years before that.
They don't see that part.
No, and so it's for the women, there are 2 things. There's the mindset issue, which I recognize and I really care about just because of my background. But then there's also the just confusion, the sheer confusion about all of this stuff that it is to interface with the government, because they don't make it easy. It's confusing. It's they use 10 different terms to mean the same thing. The systems are sometimes antiquated, and people are just unsure of how to move through that space. So it would be the mindset and then also just the confusion about how to navigate the process.
Do you think the process is meant to confuse? What do you think?
I don't think that, I think that, you know what? I don't think the process is meant to confuse. I think that the way that the government is structured, they're not thinking about the end user. So they're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about the protections that need to be in place for the government. They're thinking about all of those things. So I honestly don't think that it meant to confuse in that way. It is confusing. They provide all the rules, the federal acquisitions regulations. They provide all the information that you need to learn to be able to navigate this space, but it's a lot. It's like thousands and thousands of pages. So while I don't think it's meant to confuse, I think that it's intimidating because it's just so much. And if you don't know where to start, then you become overwhelmed and then you give up. But there are ways to slice up all the different pieces that you need to address to make it less overwhelming on yourself. And that's something that I had to learn by trial and error, because I didn't have a manual. I had to mess up and waste lots of time to then figure out, oh my God, if I do it this way, then I can get to from this point to that point a little bit easier. So they have rules, and if you understand the rules and if you understand how to navigate it, then you can get through it. But I don't think it's an intention to confuse anyone.
So tell us about how you teach this through your incubator. How often do you have it? How many slots do you have? When is the next one? Like what can the women expect in the incubator? Because I've heard from some of the past attendees. I have some clients that have won contracts. And I always love to receive that call that I work with Dr. Lauren and I've won I've actually won 2 contracts, and that was a call probably about a month and a half ago. Tell me about the program.
So the program is over 10 weeks and it's 2 hours each week over that 10 weeks. And then there are 2 days additional during the week where I have office hours. So twice a week office hours. So so there's the opportunity for the instructional part of it is the 2 hours over the 10 weeks. And then twice per week during the 10 weeks, the woman can join office hours to address their individual challenges that they're having along the way. We talk about every single thing that you need to be aware of to navigate the government contracting space, not only federal government contracting, but local government contracting and grants as well. So we talk about the federal acquisitions regulation. We talk about the tools that you need to use to do that market research that I talked about. That's so important. There are examples of actual funded contracts and grants. We go through exercises so that they can be equipped to see what is appropriately written versus what's not appropriately written. We break down the RFQs, requests for quotation, requests for proposal, notices of funding opportunity, all of those things. But you know what? And they're expected to start working on an actual proposal during the process. And those who are able to find one early enough can submit that by the time that the program is over. But what excites me most about this process is that that's not it. After they complete the incubator, there's 6 months of support. So they continue to have office hours every other week for 6 months. And so, because what my belief is, and what I know for sure in terms of how people work, is that people move at different speeds. So as they're trying to make sense of the information and learning how to apply it, by then the course is over, the incubator is over, and then they might still have questions and need formalized supports. And I just want not to leave them hanging. So there have been 6 contracts that have been awarded through these first 2 incubators, and many have applications, proposals out and are waiting, award notices or notices of funding. And so I'm really excited about that. I haven't seen anything like this.
Me either. Like, what's your overall goal for the program? And I mean, I kind of have the idea of why you started it. I mean, it's so many things you don't know how to walk through it. But what's your overall goal for the program?
You know what, Christy, the reason I started it, which many people don't know, is because I work in the field of disparities. Disparities are differences in outcomes. And so because I am a researcher and because I do this work and because I consult in this space, everything that I come across is saying how Black people are behind. Yes. We have worse health outcomes. We have worse financial outcomes. We have worse business outcomes. We have all of these challenges. And so to live in a space where this is the continual refrain, I wanted to see in what way could I impact change, even in a small group of individuals, in a meaningful way that would impact not only their lives, but the lives of their communities and the lives of their families for generations to come. And so that's why I do it. My aim is to help Black women specifically to navigate this funding process in a way that provides a revenue that's sustainable. Because the best way to get another contract or the best way to get another grant is to get the first one. Yes. Because when you demonstrate your knowledge, skills, and abilities, when you demonstrate that you are equipped to do the work, people end up coming back to you. You're a known entity. And so my goal is for every single one of these women who come through this incubator to get a contract. And so I'm doing my part to do that. Certainly it requires a lot of work on their part. And sometimes, I'm like, I hope I'm not badgering, like, okay, keep looking, scroll for dollars. There's this
She said, scroll for dollars, huh? We're going to get that on a shirt.
we should, because we do a lot of scrolling. So how about we scroll for dollars? And so that's really my goal. My goal is to impact change in the lives of the women who sign up for this program. It's for me, I could be doing a ton of other things, and it's not the easiest exchange for me in terms of the time commitment. Yeah. But I really have a desire to educate these women and to show them there's a path that can help to improve their lives.
So when is the next one, and how many students do you bring in?
The next one starts in January 11th of 2024. Okay. So and there will be 18 slots. I don't like I don't like it to be too many because of the nature of the support that I have to provide. I read and I review the proposals that these women write and provide feedback to them on how to improve it. So it's not structured for 100 people. It would just be too much. But and I hold their hands. A couple of days ago, one individual was about to have a meeting with a funder about a potential contract. And so I met with her the day before and went through the slide deck that she had, provided opportunities, suggestions for improvement, talked about some of the things that would likely come up in that meeting. And afterwards she sent me a message and she said, you know what? I felt so prepared in that process, and now she has a meeting. They're going to move forward with her. She has to fly out to a meeting with those folks, and she's working towards solidifying the terms of the contract. And so that makes me, I feel happier sometimes for the outcomes of these women than I feel for myself when I get
I understand that. A contract. I understand that completely. I cry with my clients. Sometimes I'm screaming and I'm just like, I believe it when they say, when God starts blessing a street, you be happy because he's on your street. So I feel like, hey, the proximity to me is getting close. So look, and the goal is to always get better and better and better. And sometimes I can help my clients get quicker to the money than I was able to help myself get quicker to it. But tell me this. Me too. Yes, you had a lot of this. I mean, you had all the skills. So it was just like directing it in a different path. That's all.
You know what? I was in the notes that you provided from the last power session a couple of days ago and looking through it because I thought of something and I remembered you mentioned, and I went back through and looked and made some notes in it. But it's the gift. I tell you all the time, you're the gift that keeps on giving. I'm so grateful for you. You are such an amazing person. I'm just blessed to have an opportunity to connect with you.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. I feel exactly the same way. Let's touch on, I don't want to give a number. Y'all notice I don't ever give Dr. Joseph's number because I'm never up to date because there's always something coming in for her. So I'm never up to date. But let's just say there's no more pro bono. We are the multi-7-figure entrepreneur now. And I'm sure your family, they have dropped that nickname, right? Yes. That's your old nickname. Yeah. So tell me this. I want to know, because there are going to be a lot of women listening to this podcast who are mothers, daughters, stepmoms, and it's difficult. I would say that from the moment of getting engaged and definitely married, I even changed my tone and some of the way that I handled some of my clients. And I still don't have kids. So just having another human being that I have some sort of responsibility for, I said, "Ooh, Christy, you've been kind of rough in the past." Some of these people are barely making it. But now I know. And so I get a lot of questions on balance. And I want you to talk a little bit about that because you are married, you are a mother, you are a daughter, you are a sister. How do you, like, if you had to give 2 tips on balance, I'm gonna write down your tips, okay? What would you say? How do you get all this and you always look so calm. And I know Virgos are like that, but you do always look so calm. Like everything's good, y'all. Everything is good. So how do you balance? Tell us.
I don't balance, Christy. It's
Really?
no, I alternate priorities. It's not, I've given up the,
Wow. Day by day?
yeah, it might be seasonal. It may be day by day, depending on where the shift needs to be.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I don't feel that there is balance. I feel that I do my best to ensure at all times that the non-negotiables are taken care of.
Okay.
Right? So my child's needs are taken care of. He feels nurtured and supported and loved and not going to drop the ball. My partner, for the most part, is feels connected and supported, that my interests are being developed and so on. But I don't feel that there is a balance. I do my best to take a I look at I look at the forest and the trees. So sometimes I take a step back and I'm taking the bird's eye view and looking at long-term, where am I going? Am I still on the right path to get to the destination, or do I need to make adjustments? And so I take that bird's eye view to make course shifts. But when I'm in the trees, meaning day to day, the responsibilities, I'm very calendar driven. Everything that I'm doing is on a calendar, and I'm keeping that in mind. From, I'm looking a week out. What is it that I need to do? What are the deadlines that I have that are coming up? Where do I need to shift? And there's a lot of communication with my husband to ensure that all goes in place. We're 2 very busy working adults, and we have a child who has special needs. So I'm grateful because he is very supportive of me, of my interests, of my goals, and our child. He's not absent in mind or physically absent. So that helps me, but I don't feel that there is a balance. I monitor my feelings, my emotions. I know when I am getting depleted, and I am working to be more conscientious of not getting to the point of being drained. And I've been doing a better job of that. You have been one of the persons who has always reminded me to make sure you send these messages. Are you okay? Are you getting enough rest? You know, and I'm so grateful for that because I'm so purpose driven. I have a goal and I'm going to work towards it. And sometimes I don't feel the time elapse. So I've had to become more focused on how do I cut off, knowing when to turn off. And so I know that's not likely not a good answer, but I shift priorities. I don't.
It is a good answer because I think everybody's looking for an answer and everybody's life is different. That's why I wanted to ask you because everybody's life is different. And the way that you manage and the way you manage your mate, everybody's mate is different with what they need, the way you manage your children. I mean, if I don't call my mom for 3 days, her attitude with me is, you know, mom's not going to listen to this podcast, so we're good. But my sister can go a month. Me, 3 days, and my mom has an attitude. Everybody's different. Exactly. I have a hard question, Dr. Lauren.
I think, you know, and especially being someone who receives contracts from others, there's a timeline, there's my timeline, and then there's their timeline that I have to be mindful of, the scope of work that I'm involved in. And so I say to the women, it should be the expectation that you're going to have seasons, like periods of flurried and focused activity. There are bursts of energy that you'll have to expend that may feel a little bit overwhelming, but it's not always like that. And so in the rest time, you recuperate, and then in the work time, you work.
That's what I found, actually. When it's time to rest, I rest. I fully rest. I get on Pinterest to make sure I rest, okay? I don't want to look at anything work-related. I'm looking at shoes. And I make announcements that I'm looking at shoes so that no one asks me anything business-related. I am uselessly scrolling, and I'm looking at shoes because I'm trying to zone out the hour before bed. So I have something kind of difficult, but I have to ask you because this question comes up a lot, and I think that this question is for you. How do you manage dating and your mate when you make a lot of money? I saw a post about that the other day, and it had a gazillion comments, and I threw in one of my opinions, and it's not the same. It's different when you're dating from a position of need than when you're dating from a position of I have for women, and I want you to touch on that.
Yeah, and I remember my father saying to me, I don't remember if my other sisters were there, they may have been, but I remember this conversation where my father said, you make sure you get your education and you make sure that you have your own, so that I think I'm just gonna say how he said, nobody can tell you what to do, right? So, but it wasn't about being told what to do, is having the, not for me, it's not feeling trapped. It's knowing that where I am is because of a choice I've made. It's not because I had to settle. So for me, it doesn't really come, well, first of all, I'm married, so I'm not dating. And I wasn't very much of a dater either. I worked throughout my whole, in retrospect, I've been working hard for a long time. But my perspective on that is that I want to be able to take care of myself, but I like to be taken care of. So as long as there's a plan and a path for the person to contribute in the ways that they can, I wouldn't see where there's a problem with it. I don't really talk about, the reason why I'm struggling with this question is because I don't really sit down and talk about money like that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
don't know when that would be, that wouldn't be the,
Neither do I, actually.
that wouldn't be the leading thing for me at all. I would be more interested in the person's character and
Yes.
how they are. I'm assessing for red flags. I'm looking for things outside of the finances, although I know that that's important and that's one of the reasons why there's many divorces. But I think that there has to be, I wouldn't start with how do you date when you have a lot of money, when your partner doesn't. I would talk about how do we go back to a space where we can make appropriate assessments of each other to see if we're a good fit. How do
Yeah.
we get outside of this pattern of comparing ourselves and our relationships with snapshots that people have online? How do we ensure that we are selecting a partner who is walking in the same direction as us?
Exactly.
Those would be the things I would think about. While money is important, beyond a certain amount of money, you can't really do anything with it but invest. It's
Yeah.
therefore I always say you can have so many bags, you can have so many shoes, you can have, you know, cars, you can have houses, you can only live in one place at a time, you can only drive one
Yes.
car at a time. And so for me, I like nice things and I like to be comfortable and I don't like suffering and I don't have a suffering mentality. I don't feel like I need to struggle to be able to be worthy of something. That's not my mindset. But I don't feel that for me, money is a tool to be able to have the freedom to make the choices that I may want to make without duress. So I'm sorry, ladies, I don't have a good answer for that. I say just be mindful, because I see a lot of people having conversations about what toxic traits do you like? And then they'll say, oh, it's like that really gets to me. How about we work on some of those underlying things, work on improving our own selves and find somebody who has done the work to heal themselves too.
I feel like this dating scene right now is the whole thing feels toxic. I'm so glad I'm not in the middle of it. But that came up like 2 days ago, and I'm like, I don't, I have an opinion, but I don't know if I have a great answer for this.
Yeah. Is he working? Is he work? It's like, so I always say, I don't date potential, right? People like to say,
Okay.
oh, you want to date potential. No, you have to be comfortable with whoever that person is right now in that
Exactly.
stage. Because what if the potential doesn't materialize and then you mad because you've chosen someone because of what you thought they were going to be? No, identify someone who, if nothing else shifts,
They never change.
you could ride it out successfully. And so
That's what I told my husband when we got engaged. I said, if things never change, I'm cool with who you are and what we have right now. That's it. If it gets better, cool. If it don't, cool. I know what I accepted. This is what we got. So, well, I hope that helps some ladies, who are going to listen and they're like, well, I'm a 7-figure girl. What, it's harder for me to date. And I'm like, not necessarily. I mean,
walking around with I'm a 7-figure girl on your chest and that's how you lead, then yeah.
It's going to be real hard, right? So, Dr. Joseph, what do you want to leave the women with? If you left them with 2 key pieces of advice, quotes, things to think about, what would those 2 things be?
I would say that you have what it takes to be successful in your chosen field. I would say that, if you have a desire in your heart and you are talking yourself out of it because you are unsure of how it's going to unfold, what I know for sure is that you could not have that whisper of a dream if you did not have the capacity within you to achieve it. So just if the dreams come to those who were meant to give birth to them. So that's what I would say. Go for it. Try. You'll have self-doubts. Yes, I still am doubtful along the way, but I do it anyway. So do it anyway.
Well, thank you so much. I've learned some new things. You know, I don't think I can ever let it go about the comedian and the DJ. It's here forever now. It is here forever, but I'm so glad that we had a few moments to get to know you better. And I wanted to publicly thank you for being my very first supporter of my brand new Global Power Tour podcast for the 25th Global Power Tour, and you're the very first one. So, ladies, we're going to definitely have Dr. Joseph's information, everything for you to get in touch with her and potentially join the incubator, because I know that it sells out and she will fill up her spots. So you definitely want to get into one of her spots. Thank you so much, Dr. Josephs.
Thank you, Christy. Bye.